For those of you who missed our last adventure, here's a brief recap. Last time on this channel, I made a 5-hour deep dive into the origins of the iCarly sitcom and franchise, beginning with episode 1 of season 1 and ending with the finale of season 3. Putting the workload aside, I primarily stopped there because I truly believe that the first 3 seasons of iCarly and the last 3 seasons of iCarly feel like totally different eras, and thus it's fitting to analyze them separately. If you've recently binged iCarly on Netflix, season 4 is also the first batch of episodes that they don't have. And furthermore, I think season 4 is when a lot of people fell off the show as kids, partially because it wasn't being promoted as often. So if you remember the first 3 seasons or you've rewatched them recently and you just want a recap of the rest, then this is the video for you. But if you're looking for a full recap of the entire story, I recommend checking out the iCarly playlist located on my channel, which will show you the entire saga from start to finish. And you should be able to click on that here or here right about now. Unless you're watching this on a TV, in which case, what are you showing this to your mom? One last thing before we really start here, and this should be obvious, but I just want to get it out there. I will not be covering the iCarly revival in this video. And that's partially because I've not really been paying attention to it. I mean, I didn't even watch the trailer when it came out. I've logged off of all social media to avoid it, and I'm basically trying to become a hermit just to get away from spoilers relating to it. But more importantly, as I've said many times, and I will continue to say, I started working on this project before they announced the revival. And in my eyes, the revival doesn't exist until we get to it. For me, the year is 2010 and a brand new season of iCarly is about to start airing. There's just an order to these things, and I kind of have a vision as per what I'm doing here, and trust me when I say when we get to the end, I think it's all going to be really, really satisfying. So if you don't want to miss the inevitable video where I do a review of the entirety of that thing that we're now going to pretend isn't real, I suggest going down, hitting subscribe, and setting the bell to all notifications. I know it's probably depressing that I keep saying this, but I really am generating a lot of motivation by the fact that we keep gaining subscribers, and I want to keep that momentum going. So you guys going down, hitting subscribe, it takes 2 seconds, and it really, really makes my day. However, I also want to quickly mention that if you really like these videos, and you want to guarantee that I'm able to make more, I suggest going down and subscribing to my Patreon. I've been hiring a lot of editors to do these so I can just keep writing and recording without having to stop to edit a week's worth of footage, and I'm only able to afford that because of the little support that you guys give me over on that site. Furthermore, I have just added a brand new Patreon stretch goal. If we get to 2,000 patrons, I will be doing a review of every single Garfield video game ever released. I went ahead and counted the other day, and I believe it's around 130 games, so it might be a little bit expensive and it might take a while to get right, but if you want to support the channel and you want to help us eventually reach making that big video, then once again, consider supporting me on Patreon. Just throwing a buck or two really helps out with the cause. Anyways, let's go ahead and start off our discussion where we left off before. Seasons 2 and 3 of iCarly are actually a unique case study, because despite airing over the course of 3 years, both seasons were actually one continuous production block, which turned out episodes much faster than they were being released. What's notable about this is that they finished filming the season 3 finale long before it aired, about 10 months beforehand, and after they finished filming, the show took a long production break, which meant that everyone working on the show were randomly given about 9 months off, despite it being at the peak in its popularity. Said break allowed much of the cast to seek out shorter projects during the wait. For instance, around this time was when Jeanette McCurdy filmed the cult classic wrestler film Fred the Movie, and McCurdy and Jerry Trainor also shot a high school video game drama titled Best Player, which wouldn't hit the airwaves for several years. Additionally, Miranda Cosgrove ended up doing voice work on a slightly more obscure film titled Despicable Me. Anyways, despite all of what I've told you, the actions of the individual cast members is not the most notable thing about this specific production break. Instead, the more interesting topic is what the writers and creators of the show were up to while their most popular creation was effectively on hiatus. And the answer, apparently, was that they began working on a new show with a different cast but a very similar vibe. I'm of course talking about 2010's Victorious, which began airing during iCarly Season 3 and even tied into pre-filmed episodes in pretty clever ways. I could easily make a standalone video talking about Victorious, just breaking down the show and how it's similar to iCarly but secretly totally different in every single way. But the most notable thing about it suddenly coming into existence is that one could argue that Victorious wasn't just designed to be a sister show to iCarly, but also a replacement. You see, it came out around this time that Miranda Cosgrove was planning on taking a break from acting. Not immediately, but certainly soon. Her father had apparently requested that she go to college after high school and have the free time to attend to it properly, and this is something that she wouldn't have had time to do during the hectic production schedule of the show's first 3 seasons. You have to remember that these actors really were just kids, and at some point they had to start planning for their future outside of this silly teen sitcom. Victorious was designed to be the next big thing, and to also be stuck in a narrative time loop to allow it to last forever, with all of the actors on board reportedly being fully prepared for it to outlast iCarly. And because it was also a star vehicle for someone intended to be a future pop star, it's very clear at this point that iCarly was no longer the main interest of the network or the writers, despite being one of the most popular things ever made by Nickelodeon. One of the strangest side effects of all this being true is that iCarly Season 4 is easily the most normal season of the show. It has bad episodes and bad parts, but it feels bad in the same way something like Full House feels bad. It's not nearly as mean-spirited or bordering on child abuse, and that's entirely because after Season 3, a good amount of the show's staff left to work on Victorious, a far worse show where their talents were arguably put to better use. I'm gonna justify that statement, okay? Just give me time, please. Another side effect of this is that starting here, every season of iCarly is exceptionally short. For the first 3 seasons of this show, the standard was that every season typically had around 20 to 25 episodes. But at Season 4, that number gets cut in half. Season 4 has 10 episodes, Season 5 has 9 episodes, and a bloopers episode, and Season 6 has 13 episodes, one of which being this kind of weird Treehouse of Horror style episode. So altogether, discounting the Treehouse of Horror style episode and the bloopers episode, there are 31 canon episodes of iCarly remaining. For reference, Season 1 of iCarly has 25 episodes, meaning that the first season of iCarly is nearly as long as the total of the final 3 seasons. So this might be a disappointingly short venture for those of you who were completely intoxicated by the absurd length of my first video, but I guess the only way to find out for sure is to go ahead and get started. iCarly Season 4 Episode 1 aired on July the 30th, 2010, barely a month after the Season 3 finale had premiered. Although you would be excused for not remembering it that way, just because the actor suddenly aging a year between stories is certainly kind of distracting. And speaking of aging, the plot of this episode is that Carly is celebrating her birthday, which I believe means that she's 16 or maybe 17, but I'm pretty sure 16. Anyways, the gang get together and throw her a surprise party with all of her friends and loved ones. Freddie, Sam, Spencer, Gibby, that guy from the smoothie shop, like the fully adult man who came to her 16th birthday party. That's normal. Carly notes that this is a lot better than her last birthday, which Spencer apparently royally screwed over by taking her to a petting zoo where a goat—
Don't talk about what the goat did!
Long story short, Spencer is apparently committed to getting things right this time and does so by making a gummy bear themed lamp for Carly, which she asks Gibby to take up to her room and plug in as a surprise. And you know, the crazy thing is, 65 episodes in, we still haven't seen Carly's room. Which is weird because they mention it constantly, and obviously it's an essential part of her life. It's where she spends most of her time off screen. And that's one of the reasons that this episode was so hyped up. Because this is the first episode in the entire iCarly series where we finally get to see what Carly's room looks like. And I thought I lived in a squalor. Yes, Spencer's well-intentioned birthday present has caught fire to Carly's room, destroying everything she holds dear.
I bet what that goat did to you last year doesn't seem so bad anymore. What did the goat do?
Spencer, as an insurance representative, look at everything destroyed in the fire and is shocked to learn that an antique watch gifted to them by their great-grandmother is so valuable that he is immediately given a check for $82,000. He intends to use said money to build Carly a brand new room, but sends her off to get a job at the Groovy Smoothie to build the expectation that they're out of money to help repair her room. That night, Spencer has a dozen people over to speed build her a new bedroom, while Carly emotionally struggles over at her new job.
Come on, Carly. So your room burned down. Look at the bright side.
What's the bright side?
Anyway,
Carly comes home defeated, underpaid, and depressed, but is reluctantly dragged upstairs by Spencer as he shows her the new room which they have built for her. Truly, one of the coolest living spaces you could ask for as a teenager, all funded by the $82,000 that they were given by insurance.
Spencer spent it all on your room.
The whole wad, baby!
Which is so stupid because we rent this place, but who cares?
So yeah, they all celebrate the coolness of this new room, Gibby says some funny stuff, and the episode concludes to a credit scene of the cast singing the Victorious song to try and get you to watch that show instead. This episode sets into play some core new elements of the show from here on out. First of all, Carly's room is quickly going to become a core centerpiece to the show's storytelling. While previously, the gang would basically only be portrayed hanging out on the iCarly set like that is Carly's bedroom, from here on out this room becomes a lounge of sorts where the characters spend a good amount of time together. However, a lot more notable is the episode's treatment of Gibby and Tebow. While previously both had been well-loved supporting characters, from here on out they both get promotions of sort. Gibby, from here on, is billed consistently as one of the show's main characters, and episodes without him are going to become increasingly rare, and Tebow follows up right behind him, despite how rarely it makes sense that this weird older adult is so emphatic about hanging out with a 16-year-old. The point is that from this point forward, you could argue that the show has gone from struggling to juggle 4 leads to a new total of 6. And with the remaining episodes being so few and far between, I do remember being annoyed as a teenager that the show was continuously losing focus, and I wonder if I'll agree with my former opinion as I keep going further. I do know one thing for sure, it'll be a cold day in hell before I get tired of seeing Tebow.
hey, what can I get you little ladies today?
Do you sell smoothies?
What?
Season 4 episode 2 is a special episode because it features a celebrity guest cameo and also a reveal of a lore character who we've never actually seen before. Jane Lynch of Glee fame appearing in the role of Sam's previously unseen mother. In the episode, Sam has yet another series of massive fights with her mother, eventually causing her to suddenly move out and begin living in the Shea household. However, Carly finds it impossible to put up with Sam, mostly because of her obsessive eating, which leaves their apartment rife with uneaten food. And in the heat of the moment, wanting to make things right, she invites Sam's mother over so the two can patch things up.
Carly, you got my mother.
You guys have to make up.
I don't want any part of her.
You don't deserve my parts.
This episode makes me uncomfortable, and in a way that I guess I couldn't ascertain as a teenager, but is very clear to me as an adult. I think the issue at hand is that Sam's mother, by basic definition of everything we know about her character, is an abusive person. She is abusive to Sam, and that has caused Sam to have massive issues in her personality, which causes her to then be abusive to people in her life as well. And I understand that the pretense of dealing with this kind of thing as a teenager is that if you leave your parents, you become homeless. But Sam does not owe her mother anything. No child who is abused by their parents owes said parents anything. And I just find the overarching narrative of this one, that Sam and her mother must make up because they're mother and daughter, to be a particularly limited take that is extremely unsatisfying. And furthermore, the more that they try and play it for comedy, the more tone deaf it comes across. Like, haha, Sam grew up without a loving home. Haha, Sam's mother is physically abusive, causing her to act out in fits of violence. That's so fucking funny. Carly becomes so worried about the pair that she takes them to family therapy. But the therapist has apparently never experienced dysfunction before and is at a complete and total loss. Brief pause here. I just want to mention something really quick. One really tiny thing about this episode. It's funny when you watch a show like this and you actually find yourself getting invested and you take note of the sort of consistent lore and continuity. And then they shuffle writers a little and they make one continuity mistake that still bothers you a lot. Case in point, this piece of dialogue, which happens 15 minutes into the episode when Sam and her mother are at this therapist's office together.
You two need to spend some time in the therapy box. It's a new kind of therapy that's a bit unorthodox.
Well, that's cool. We're not Jewish.
Yes, you are. Sam, look at me, Sam, look at me. You are Jewish. You have mentioned this numerous times. You had a bat mitzvah. You have a Star of David in your locker at school. You are Jewish. How did she forget that she's Jewish? This comment section is going to be filled with people being like, well, what if Sam was just lying about her religion? Yeah, well, what if she was huffing paint thinner? Anyways, so this therapist decides that he wants to try out a new experimental form of therapy. He locks the pair in solitary confinement. And that's it. He locks them in a closet and begins crying.
Your friends are insane.
Yes, they are. You are a therapist. Is this your first day on the job? Carly gets locked in the box and the therapist won't let her out either. Soon enough, we learn that Carly is deathly claustrophobic and begins having an intense episode.
What's wrong?
I can't help but notice that she's making goat noises. Is that a coincidence? Or does she have claustrophobia because of the encounter she had with that goat? I don't know, this episode sucks. Meanwhile, in the B-plot, the Groovy Smoothie is suddenly attacked by a hammer-wielding bandit who strikes the store before fleeing in a flash. We soon learn that all the security cameras in the area are busted, as the criminal is infamous for sneaking in beforehand and disabling all of the security cameras in the area. somehow. However, during the robbery, Freddy is seen testing out a pair of glasses with a hidden camera and manages to film the culprit in the act. In the resulting chaos of him being the first person to ever capture film of this violent hammer bandit, Freddy's full name and address are stated live over the air, leading him to become a paranoid mess as he frets that Maxwell might soon come after him for violent revenge. In the end, Spencer manages to trick the bandit by swapping Freddy's apartment number with another resident down the hall, which somehow works, as the criminal is fully fooled by the tactic. As a kid, I remember this part of the episode being really frustrating, because they present this dude as one of the most stealthy, intelligent criminals in the Seattle area, and also as someone who relies on hitting things with hammers for the second half of his plan, and also as someone who is incapable of noticing when a simple plate switcheroo has been orchestrated in front of him, and also that the police are still incapable of identifying him at this point when he's a pretty outlandish looking dude. Anyways, let's move on to Season 4, Episode 3, I Get Pranky. In the episode, Sam and Freddy are talking about the best pranks they've ever played on people. And Carly admits something. She has never played a prank on someone outside of the iCarly web show.
I'm sure it'll happen. When I, meet the right person.
The group decide that they have to get Carly to lose her prankginity, but her pranks are consistently terrible and fail to elicit any negative response from her victims. This is until Spencer tells her a story of how when he was in the 9th grade, he was once known as the Prank King, until things got too far and he accidentally injured several of his classmates by getting garlic powder in their eyes.
It's supposed to be funny! It was just a prank!
Carly hears the story, but all she takes away from it is that Spencer can teach her how to do good pranks. Spencer insists that he's quit the game, but after a round of puppy dog eyes, he eventually relents. Shortly thereafter, Carly texts Sam and Freddy and tells them to come to the iCarly studio. There they see a dish tray and a note which claims to be from Neville, telling them that he's left them a treat. That treat seems to be the decapitated head of Carly, before she reveals that it was just a prank bro. After this, we quickly learn that Spencer is now once again addicted to pranks. Carly tries to get him to stop, but he doesn't, and he pranks more people. He gets beat up, he decides not to prank people anymore. This episode is all B-plot. I remember this being a very common thing from here on out. Okay, so there is one part of this episode that actually is super notable, perhaps the most notable thing in the entire season. There's a scene around the middle of the episode where the characters tell Gibby to climb a ladder and then jump from the ceiling, and sure enough, he goes ahead and does that.
Wait, we forgot Gibby.
Oh, yeah. Gibby!
Now, for quite a while, this has gone around as kind of a viral meme, often under the title Gibby Dies, entirely exploiting the fact that that fall really looks like it hurt. But a few years ago, the actor that played Gibby revealed that it was all stunt work, it was done by a stunt actor, but that it wasn't acting, because it really did hurt, because that stunt actor was seriously injured in that clip.
There's that meme where I fall and die, that fucking Gibby dies. He hits the floor really hard. It's funny. But yeah, that stunt was that guy like broke all his ribs or something. I'm supposed to fall from the ceiling and just hit the ground and get the wind knocked out of me. But dude, that guy hit that fucking ground.
Wait, he was actually
trying to
just
assassinate you.
Yeah, in the script, he was actually supposed to just fall onto the ground with no safety or anything.
No safety, yeah.
I'm gonna highly fucking recommend that anyone curious check out the clip on YouTube. This is a brutal fucking stunt fall.
Yeah.
Holy
it's
shit.
Fucking bad.
He got like actually hurt, and did you have to stop the show because of it? Or the recording?
I think he got carried off. We stopped filming.
I think that's incredible, where you get this take of the man literally killing himself, and that's the one that ends up in the show. That's amazing.
If I remember correctly, he was not doing too well. Like, that was scary.
The WWE doesn't even go that far for realism.
The most telling part of this sequence to me is the reaction that the actors give to this dude just hitting the floor. Everyone stiffens up, and Nathan Kress specifically makes this face that I don't think he could have acted. Just like this honest, agape look at seeing this man die in front of him. One thing people don't talk about with this scene is this stuntman allegedly fell into an unsafe, unpadded environment and broke a bunch of his ribs. And when they shot the pickup material, I presume a few days later, when they shot that pickup material, they wrote in a joke where Gibby mentions that he broke his ribs.
Did you guys hear my ribs crack?
And it's like, I'm just trying to imagine the people who made this show sending someone to the hospital and knowing that their actions directly led to someone being seriously hurt and sent to the emergency room. And then kind of just going, well, we're ambivalent to this. Speaking of ambivalence, we're going to skip episode 4 for now because it contains a crime and easily one of the worst things that the cast have done so far. So let's move on to season 1, episode 5, The Boring Wedding One. A fan sends in a V-mail saying that they want to propose to their girlfriend live on iCarly. He does so, and she says yes, and all of the iCarly gang are invited to their wedding, with Carly and Sam being the bridesmaids and Freddie being the best man, causing conflict with the groom's brother, who is angry that he was not picked to be the best man.
Just watch your back, internet boy.
However, the wedding is suddenly broken off when the bride declares that she has fallen in love with Spencer, someone who has stood in the same room as her for barely an hour at this point. And honestly, babe, I can't blame you. And boy, this one, it keeps going for sure. They just kept filming it.
It wasn't my choice.
How do you like me grabbing your lip?
I don't.
I know.
Carly tries to get the groom to sing a romantic song he wrote about his fiancée, but he's so embarrassed that he pisses himself in front of all of their friends and family. But Carly sings the song herself and saves the wedding. Buy the Miranda Cosgrove album, now available for $29.99. Anyways, I love this season because it's all boring. All these episodes are boring, but they don't make me feel bad, which is an improvement. We're halfway done with the season, by the way. Season 4, episode 6 should be a bit of a salvation for us because it's the first real event episode of the season. And furthermore, it's one of the last episodes in the show's run, which is unambiguously about an element of influencer culture which hasn't really been properly explored yet. That being, web creator conventions and the ways that audience members can interact with creators at said events. I'm of course talking about the classic 2-part episode, I Start a Fan War. At the start of this episode, Carly is at school and ends up crushing on a specific generic boy toy who she sees in the hall. Freddie, showing off his slowly developed sense of maturity, actually flaunts no signs of insecurity about this, nearly encouraging Carly to go after him if she really likes him. Later that week, Carly is contacted by said boy, who kicks off the conversation by asking about the iCarly ships. As we discover in the episode, audiences watching the iCarly web show have developed a shipping culture identical to that of the real world, leaving many fans speculating on who Freddie should end up with many people online presuming that Carly and Freddie have been boyfriend-girlfriend for several years. Carly dissuades this idea and responds emphatically when Adam asks her out on a date that Saturday. But in the end, she has to turn him down because that Saturday is the annual Webicon, a convention she was supposed to go to the year prior before she was kidnapped by an obsessive fan. The dialogue in this episode directly states that the end of season 3 was a year ago for the iCarly gang, matching the production schedule of the episodes, but not the broadcast order. As in the real world, iPsycho aired barely 5 months before the episode in question. And so, that Saturday, the gang all make it to the convention, but are overwhelmed at just how popular they are with the Webicon attendees, as Freddie is, at one point, grabbed by fangirls and nearly torn to shreds, before going back in for seconds once he realizes how rarely he feels the touch of a woman. Later on during the convention, the official iCarly panel is held, and the room is packed full of ecstatic fans of the web show from all corners of the globe. And as we learn, the entire room has been split into two warring factions.
Freddie and I aren't in a romantic relationship.
Respectfully, I disagree.
This is made worse by the fact that Adam, the boy that Carly likes from school, has also decided to attend the panel, and runs out of the room as he's also convinced by the crowd that Carly and Freddie are secretly in love and destined to be together. Something that they both deny, but Sam encourages for the hell of it. Meanwhile, in the B-plot, Spencer gets into a Steam feud with special guest star Jack Black, which ends with the two having an epic battle of wits, and then weapons.
Wrist balls!
Meanwhile, in the C-plot, Gibby tries to get to the convention, but his grandfather is blind, and they get stuck at Inside Out Burger. Back in the A-plot, Sam brings Carly Swoon back in, tied up to keep him from leaving, and tells the audience that Carly and Freddie aren't actually dating, causing the crowd to presume that Sam and Freddie are dating instead, igniting a riot between the two factions, with things culminating when Carly is almost Geraldo Rivera-ed. However, Sam is eventually able to calm the crowd down, and Carly gives an ultimate speech about how iCarly was never about the shipping culture.
iCarly is not really about our romantic relationships. iCarly's about comedy.
Carly casually mentions that the boy in the front row, tied up, is the only person she wants to date, causing the crowd to physically assault him as a mob, causing Carly to roll her eyes, walk away, and presumably leave another ex-boyfriend to be sent to the ICU.
Yeah, poor Adam. Well, let's go.
You see, guys, this is what iCarly is about. Avoiding the repercussions of your actions. I Start a Fan War is one of the final episodes in the show's run dedicated to studying unique aspects of internet culture. In this case, the phenomenon of people shipping real-world people with each other as if they're cartoon characters and not real human beings. However, in a much larger way, we have to recognize that that's not what this episode is about at all. In reality, I Start a Fan War is an anti-subtle criticism of the iCarly fandom itself, essentially telling the viewers at home that they enjoy iCarly for the wrong reasons. I've been told the creator of the show at the time would often use his internet blog to vent about shipping culture in his shows, and this episode was most likely a way for him to try and dissuade audiences away from topics like that. Which is kind of weird because most of season 3 was dedicated to fanning the flames of these shipping wars. Even this episode itself was promoted as if it was an episode which was explicitly romantic, which obviously wasn't the case. This is certainly an episode that I remember watching at the time, but I also think it was the first episode I ever saw that made me kind of realize that iCarly was going to take a bit of a dip in quality. I actually remember right after I finished this, I had this awful gut feeling that we were going to get to the finale and Freddie wasn't going to end up with anybody. You know what I mean? And today that sounds like a dumb thing to complain about, but I mean, this was 5 years. A 5-year story arc that Nickelodeon got an entire generation hooked on. And the answer that they came up with was that you were a loser if you cared what was going to happen. But I think another oncoming fault line that this episode set up is that iCarly started out as a sitcom about a group of fictional teenagers who become internet famous within their universe and the repercussions of that happening to them. However, by this point in the series, iCarly had become such a big show that it pivoted to being a meta-contextual commentary on its own existence as a cultural phenomenon. So they're starting to kind of phase out the well-thought-out and intelligent storylines about internet culture, and they're replacing all of that with jokes where the characters know that they're in a sitcom.
Happy birthday!
What is that, your catchphrase?
In other words, the show has bought into its own hype in a way that I find to be personally pretty annoying. And the more we continue past this, the more the writers are going to spin out, and the more it's going to feel like they absolutely despise the reasons that kids were watching at home. Anyways, let's dive deeper into the filler as we look at Season 4, Episode 7, I Hire an Idiot. Let's get through this one fast, it barely deserves mention. The iCarly gang are tired of working on the web show and decide to hire an intern. However, Carly and Sam decide to hire a dude who's 2010 hot despite him being a complete and total idiot. Said himbo continues to mess the show up, but Carly and Sam are so transfixed by his raw sexuality that they refuse to fire him. In retaliation, Freddie hires a female version of this, which the girls decry as offensive, but Freddie says he will only fire his hot idiot if they fire theirs.
I'll fire my feminidiot when you fire your imbecile.
Eventually, after the female intern steals a baby and the male intern eats a bunch of raw meat, the group finally agree to fire all of the interns. Oh, and then the girl is actually smart, but I guess she really did kidnap that baby. Anyways, I know I just said that the fan convention episode is one of the final episodes about internet culture in a major way, but there is actually one other episode in Season 4 which substantially discusses a phenomenon which has become a major thing online in the last few years. I'm talking about Season 4, Episode 8, I Pity the Neville, which features the return of Neville Pepperman and the repercussions of his mass public shaming. So the plot of this one is all about the phenomenon of Karens. Viral clips of human beings being absolutely god-awful people and then becoming the fascination of a very bored and very angry planet. In the story, Neville is randomly caught on video yelling at a girl for bumping into him at the store, causing her to begin crying as his anger only grows. Anyways, this viral clip receives millions of views on Splashface, and his life is ruined overnight, causing all of the gang to celebrate as they rightfully should. They then record the new episode of iCarly, which features a cutaway skit where Freddie is dressed up like a sexy vampire. This skit really isn't that funny on a surface level, but the on-point visuals are so goddamn surreal that I'm trying to find all of the words in the world to describe this, just so I can continue to show you visual examples of Freddy dressed up like Robert Pattinson. You guys seen any good TV shows recently? I haven't. The gang throw what they designate a karma party. A party celebrating that the life of their arch-nemesis has fallen to pieces exclusively due to his own actions. There, Freddy discovers that girls in Seattle are obsessed with his performance in the skit, swooning over him, but only when he does the Twilight voice.
I edited that whole movie with some new software I just got. Cutting room flow.
Yeah. That was it. Seriously.
Meanwhile, Neville's whole life has fallen to pieces, as everyone he runs into treats him poorly because they've all seen the viral clip of him being cruel. Tortured by this, Neville becomes consumed with an ongoing flood of self-loathing and self-hatred, even losing track of his ambitions for revenge and rue. Neville goes to the iCarly gang and tries to convince them to allow him to use the iCarly platform to show that he has regret for his actions. Sam says they'll do it, but only if Neville drinks punch from her dirty sneaker, which she's been using for over a year. He goes through with this, and they agree to help him, filming an apology video where he gives out free smoothies and bags of creamed corn. Of course, this goes over terribly, as the internet en masse sees through Neville's desperate attempt to find a way out of his mistakes, and then go after the iCarly gang for colluding with him. There's this really weird joke at this point where Spencer is, like, mad that he doesn't have a B-plot in this one. Like, overtly the joke is that Spencer is angry that he doesn't have enough scenes in the episode. And I don't know, I like me some fourth wall jokes, but at this point it feels like iCarly does this every other episode, and it's just lazy. The iCarly gang have Neville do a live apology video on the web show, and they even bring out the little girl in an emotional moment which goes equally viral. Neville honestly thanks the gang for helping him turn his life around and doesn't reveal any sort of secret scheme connected connected to the events of the story, before he bumps into a man in a wheelchair and again has another Karen freakout moment, which once again goes completely viral. This leads us to Season 1, Episode 9, IOMG, which is, in my mind, the true finale for the season, as it leads directly into the main story arc of Season 5, casually skipping over the actual finale, which had yet to air at this point. I am very surprised I never saw this one as a kid, because I certainly would have gotten really excited over it, even if as an adult this episode is kind of really weird. Let's break this one down. In the story, we learn that Ridgeway has an annual tradition wherein the student body are locked in the building overnight and forced to work on various science experiments. The school recently has had a new transfer in a guy named Brad, who actually applied to be an intern on iCarly several episodes earlier. And Freddie and him begin working on a phone app for their school presentation. The app is designed to scan the faces of whoever uses it to identify the mood of the person in question. Sam, when hearing this pitch, decides she wants to join in, as she begins spending copious time with the two boys. On the day of the lockdown, Freddie scans Sam's face as part of the experiment, only for it to identify her mood as being in love. He shares this information with Carly, and they both come to the exact same conclusion about all of the clues laid out before them. Sam is in love with what's-his-face. Speaking of which, can we just stop for a moment here and talk about Carly's project, because it's one of the weirdest things in the show so far. Her experiment involves inviting her brother to the school and locking him in a soundproof box which he cannot see or hear out of. She then selectively tortures him with different stimuli while he's locked inside, playing loud pop music he hates, filling the box with a stinky gas, and then starving him until he's begging for food. At which point she says that he can only eat if he has a blindfold on, as it turns out that she's attached electrical wires to the metal dish, and she electrocutes him as he begins eating. Maybe we need to revisit that fan theory that Carly is secretly Megan. I don't know what the fuck this B-plot is about. They never give it a conclusion, so like all we can potentially gather is maybe Carly is trying to give herself therapy by reenacting traumatic situations, you know, like the Nora incident, but more likely she just wanted to hook a car battery up to her brother's nuts. That's all we can gather. Anyways, Carly tells Sam about the app saying she's in love, and Sam acts embarrassed and angry, saying that the app was just wrong. Carly tries very hard to get Sam and Brad to hook up, telling her that she deserves to be happy and find someone that she's happy with. Sam gets into a massive fight with Carly over this, and ends up sulking in the school courtyard. At which point Freddie approaches her and tries to give her a pep talk. Freddie says that Carly is right about everything, and that Sam does deserve to be happy, and that she shouldn't be afraid to share her emotions, especially with a guy that she secretly likes, because she never knows how that guy will react or how things will go. At which point, Sam kisses Freddie, and this is where we end Season 4. With Sam and Freddie realizing that they might honestly have a shot at a real relationship. Or at least, that's kind of how the season ends. Because directly after this episode, Season 4, Episode 10 aired, a mega crossover with the show Victorious, which was aired outside of its logical chronological order, as it's supposed to be set before Episode 8, which is itself set before Episode 7. I Party with Victorious is the longest episode in the show's run, being the length of 3 episodes instead of the regular 2, and it's easily the worst episode of Season 4, and we're gonna skip it for now. With that, let's move on to the iCrimes recap of the season. For those of you who missed the first video, I have been keeping track of every crime that the gang commits in the show, and I've been ranking them at the end of every season as kind of a fun little side thing. You'll catch on, don't worry. Okay, starting us off is the first crime of this video and our iCrime number 33, child endangerment. But not of the attempted variety. At the start of Season 4, Episode 1, when Carly announces that her birthday is coming up soon, Spencer enters with a giant pie, which Gibby breaks out of for a visual gag. Gibby exclaims that he couldn't breathe inside of the pie, with Spencer saying that he told him to breathe through the tube. At which point the Gibster responds,
I couldn't find the tube!
Oh, I forgot the tube.
It's so easy to forget while you're watching the show, but Gibby, Carly, Sam, and Freddy are all literal children. And Spencer is an adult, and when he does something like almost kill Gibby by baking him into a pie, you remember that this is a very not good thing for him to be doing. Anyways, for our next crime, we're going to be getting in kind of a gray area, I guess, and that involves the question, are Gibby and T-Bow main characters themselves? They certainly appear constantly and are often billed as the show's leads. So when they commit a crime, is that worth pointing out, even when it's a crime done to one of the actual main characters? Let's just roll the die and say the answer is yes. Anyways, in episode 1, as you'll remember, Carly briefly gets a job working at the Groovy Smoothie. However, she's shocked to discover that the Groovy Smoothie has a policy of dissuading its workers from washing their hands. And apparently, the pay is absurdly low. When Carly gets home, she reports that she has worked 12 hours straight and was barely paid enough to afford a single can of paint for her bedroom. First of all, T-Bow is clearly violating Washington's strict child labor laws, which clearly state that a 16 to 17-year-old should only be able to work 8 hours in any given day. And second, based on Carly's estimate that she, quote, barely made enough for a single can of paint, let's go ahead and presume that she made about $45, on the pricey end of that estimate. If that is the case, then Carly was paid $3.75 an hour, far below the $8.55, which was the minimum wage for Seattle in 2010. Now, if Carly had been 14 to 15 in 2010, then she would have qualified for a slightly diminished minimum wage, a minimum of around $7.20 an hour. But as we've established, basic continuity within the show easily makes it that she has to be 16 to 17 at this point, and thus qualifies for the full $8.55 pay rate. I can easily say, based on my studying of Washington law, that T-Bow in this case has easily violated 3 very explicit and well-known Washington rules and regulations by not enforcing the washing of hands, overworking minors, and underpaying staff. And thus, I'm going to go ahead and call those iCrimes number 34, 35, and 36. And our next crime, by coincidence, is also a violation of child labor laws. In Season 1, Episode 4, the gang realize that people want to buy their terrible designer penny t-shirts, and they begin selling them online. However, Sam eventually flakes for a few days, and when she comes back, she has over 100 shirts made from scratch, causing her friends to ask where she could have possibly gotten these so easily.
You want to know how I made so many penny tees? Check it out.
Yes, this isn't a dream sequence or anything. Sam has made a sweatshop where the workers are 4th graders and she pays them $5 a day. You'll also recognize this room as the one where that dude fell and broke all his ribs. Truly cursed ground. I don't know what you guys want me to add to this one. Like here, I googled if sweatshops are illegal. Google says yes. Details about the sweatshop, right. There's a scene where this little girl has a cut and Sam puts duct tape on her arm. There's a scene where we learn that the food they're served at the sweatshop was found in a dumpster and has garbage in the food. There's a scene where Sam yells at someone for drinking water on the clock. She ends up feeding them processed meat in a can that's intended to be fed to horses. That's funny. Please laugh at the joke. Carly and Freddy decide to take half of the sweatshop upstairs and try to make a more fun, light-hearted sweatshop. But it turns out that the kids don't make the shirts too fast when their human rights aren't being violated. And long story short, all of the kids end up quitting, start their own penny tea business, and drive the gang out of business. And the group all learn an important lesson. you would hope. Next is iCrime number 38. In the B-plot of the wedding episode, Gibby sees a $5 bill in a tree and tries to go get it. He stops an elderly woman on the street, basically hitting on her, and asks for her help in exchange for the two going and getting coffee. Eventually, he is able to get the bill, but when he falls over, he accidentally knocks the woman out. He then flees the scene, taking Guppy and his money with him. Gibby killed an old lady. Moving on to iCrime number 39. In Season 1, Episode 6, Carly's prospective boyfriend leaves the convention after believing that Carly and Freddy are an item. Sam finds him trying to get on a shuttle bus, ties him up with electrical wire, and forces him back into the convention room. You see this? This is kidnapping. Very different from false imprisonment, and also our iCrime number 40. In the B-plot of episode 7, Spencer explains that when he quit law school several years earlier, he made a promise to his grandfather that if he didn't have an art piece in a Seattle museum within 3 years, he would return to college. Spencer, surprisingly, doesn't have any art in any museum, which is potentially because he hasn't made a sculpture in a long time. So he decides to sneak into a renowned Seattle museum and puts up an art piece without permission. That being the sculpture he made in the pilot, because again, he doesn't make sculptures anymore apparently. He gets caught doing this once and is thrown out, but sneaks in a second time and manages to pull it off. And what you can imagine must be breaking and entering. When he nearly gets kicked out again, he begins making out with the woman trying to throw him out, which is an act of sexual assault. She's really into it, but you know what? I'm counting it anyway, so that's iCrimes number 41 and 42. Now, you'll remember that earlier in this video, I said I was saving iParty with Victorious for later. Well, you might be surprised to find out that said later period isn't right now. We are going to properly cover this episode a little bit down the road. For now, all you need to know about this episode is that Gibby goes to a party undercover, someone recognizes him from iCarly, and he punches the person, knocking them out and dragging them into another room. That's iCrime number 43 and the end of our Season 4 discussions. These are taking a lot less time to do these days, aren't they?